This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. So this morning we're going to start a many-part topic regarding one of the greatest disasters that occurred in the last 150 years. And this is a disaster, not a wartime disaster, a peacetime disaster. But we're going to examine it from the Jewish and halachic perspective. But in order to do so, we need to get some of the background history and details. So today's shiur, which I hope to get through. Today's shiur, I hope to get through the source materials that we have. We have quite a bit, so we want to try to accomplish that today, and that is the Titanic. There's a Hasidic Yid by the name of Yechiel Goldhaber who wrote a very scholarly work on the Titanic. Actually, the Sefer has two parts to it, and the second part is about the Titanic. The part about the Titanic he calls Mishpatecha Tohaim Rabba. Your judgment is the great deep. So many halachic shilas arose because of this terrible disaster. But in order to understand the halachic ramifications, we have to get the background and the history. Okay, so he gives a little introduction over here. He says, one of the most spoken about disasters in the beginning of the 20th century, a disaster that has no connection to war, was the sinking of the Titanic that happened about 100 years ago. But by now it's already 105 years or so. He says in April 1912, Tafrei Shayin Beis, the Titanic sunk. How many passengers were there? 2,208 passengers. After La'achar Shehisnagsha. What does Hisnagsha mean? We're going to test out your modern Hebrew today. After it collided, B'karachon. What's a karachon? An iceberg, Gadal Mimadim, giant, Belev Hokyonis HaAtlanti, in the heart of the Atlantic Ocean. Tvias HaTitanic, the sinking of Titanic, the largest ship in the world in its time, left a indelible impression and shocked the world. The forces of nature prevailed over technology of the civilization of the time. And an untold number of books, memoirs, and were written about this disaster. So we're going to examine it from a halachic perspective. But today, we're going to just try to get the historical background. And, yes. Exactly. Right. So, and we're not going to get the answer to that today. So, but I just hope that by whatever we learn today, although it's not technically Talmud Torah, but Hechsher Mitzvah, in order to understand, so you want me to jump the gun. You want to know what shilas are there in halachic perspective. Well, first and foremost, the shilas of Aguna. There were many Jewish passengers. We'll see how many. We'll see what record we have of them. Not only Jewish passengers, there were observant passengers, from passengers. There were many people emigrating from Russia via England or Ireland to America. And many of the men drowned. Now, the most of the survivors were women, and most of those who perished were men. And that was because they had the rule, women first. And that also maybe we'll examine. Because in halacha it would seem that if you could save the life of a man or a woman, a man takes precedence. So is there any precedence given for a woman in saving a woman? This rule, ladies first, does that run in contradistinction to halacha? Other shilas. So again, we mentioned iguna. What's the halacha if a man drowns in mayim she'ein lahem soif, water that has no end? Technically, according to the Gemara, if a ship goes down in mayim she'ein lahem soif, the woman cannot get married. Even midairaisa, a woman cannot get married because we're afraid maybe he came up on the other end of the water. If it's a finite amount of water, if it's water you could see the end of, then it's much more lenient, because if you didn't see him come up on the other side, so then that means he didn't come up. But mayim she'ein lahem soif, which you would think should be more lenient, is actually more chaymer, it's more stringent. So let's get the details of what happened historically, and hopefully this will give us a better picture of how to apply the halachic principles. Also, many Sifrei Musar were written, actually what lessons you could learn from the Titanic, and there are a number of other things that we learn as well. Okay, so take a look, you just close the door, in Parak Poiseach Reka History. Here's the Reka History means the historical background. Now the Titanic, which is a word where the etymology is of a Greek origin, comes from the word Titanos, right, which means giant, was the largest ship ever built in England. It was the second of a trilogy of boats, which were tremendous boats that were built for the White Star Line, Kaveh HaKochav Halavan. That was the name of the company. The names of the three ships were Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Actually, the Britannic was larger than the Titanic, and the Britannic also went down. Anybody know when? In World War I. It hit a mine, and the whole ship sunk. It was a hospital. It was used as a hospital. Okay.
So it was after the Titanic.
Yeah, it was after the Titanic. So can you imagine 2 out of the 3 of the largest ships that were built never to be able to sink, Rubam Kekulam sank. Okay. Now, why did they make the Titanic? It was a competition of companies. There was a different company that was able to produce faster ships, and the owner of the White Star Line figured if you can beat them in speed, beat them in size. Okay. They were both built, all these 3 boats were built on the latest technology, and they were all considered Bilti Nitanos Latvia. But, yeah, impossible to sink. So here we have over here a picture. Now, it's not a picture that I took personally, but this is the Haflagami Balafest, Nivnasa Hasfina. This is the ship taking sail, departure from Belfast, Ireland, where the ship was built. Okay, so Titanic Tuchana b'miucha k'dei lamed b'tinam makoshim shel tzfon ha'okyanos Atlantic. It was built to be able to withstand the harsh North Atlantic waters, and therefore it was made out of 2,000 sheets of filada. Steel, very good. Yeah, that was you. Very good.
What is it?
Okay, but that's I don't think it appears as steel. Gemishim, what's gemishim? Flexible. It was of a flexible material. V'chazakim. Shloisha million masmaros barzel. 3 million nails. Rikua mafalda machabrim achalakim. 3,000 bolts. V'hi tzivida. I think it means it was fastened together with the surest technology. Larabas 15 mechitzos atamos lamayim. 15 compartments, automatic compartments for the water. Through a door system. So this ship had the cutting edge technology. Okay, how big was it? 269 meter. It's 882 feet 9 inches. About 4 times as long as a Boeing 747. Rochave Hamarbi, 28 meters. They say it was about 92 feet wide. And the height of it, from the bottom to the top, was 104 feet. L'sfina hayu 29 dude kitor. I guess some type of chimney to exhale the smoke. It says 29. Yachla lahagia. Lemehiro shall 23 kashar. 23 could reach 23 knots. You needed 58 sailors to, throw the charcoal into the. They had 159 ovens. Yeah. He okay, so maximum capacity 3,547. Luckily, it was not a sellout crowd on that day of the Titanic. Okay. So what's this got to do with halacha? Well, one of the innovations of this ship was kosher kitchen. Okay? One of the innovations was a kosher kitchen. in order to cater to the needs of the Jews. I'm sure they were able to charge a lot more for that, and I'm sure they had in mind to make money, as they always do. Okay, from the year Tafresh Mem Aleph. What's Tafresh Mem Aleph? What do you add to figure out a Hebrew date? 1240, very good. 1881. Be'ikvais praos sophos vanegev. In the heels of the pogroms. There's an expression in Hebrew, sophos vanegev, for the pogroms of the south, which was in the southwest of Russia. Those were pogroms that took place from April 1881 to 1882 in the Ukraine until after the First World War. Higru. What does Higru mean? They emigrated. Meirussia America, B'derch Klal, Derch Europa Maravis. Many Jews emigrated from Russia via Western Europe. Kishnayim v'chatzi million Yehudim. How many Jews? 2.5 million Jews emigrated from Russia at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. As self-understood, most of those Jews were observant Jews. The effects of assimilation were not as rampant, perhaps, as they are today. So they had those creating the ships and the travel means had to provide for Jewish travelers. Okay. So he writes over here, Trenton Times. First mention of a kosher kitchen was reported in the Trenton Times, June 1901, that the ship SS Philadelphia had a kosher kitchen. Interesting. What's a tzi? Well, a tzi is a ship. It's said over that one of the sailors of the ship of the boats on the Hamburg-America line, it said one of the sailors himself was a Jew by the name of Albert Balin, not to be confused with Yaakov Bailish. Yeah, his name was Albert Balin. Who it was his idea to have kosher kitchens. Okay, now do we have any evidence that there was a kosher kitchen on the Titanic? Well, not right now. We have Eidos al Matbeach Kosher al Titanic Kamat Shalino, so we don't have too many remnants. They found the wreck of the Titanic about 70 years after it sank in the 80s, and they were not able to find the kosher any matzah balls floating around in the ocean over there. But Ulam
and no Tu'utas Hechsher.
No. It said Ulam Nosru Eidos Chios Shel Matbeach Kosher Al Achoisa of the Olympic. Right? There were 3 ships. Right? There is a documentary evidence that there was a kosher kitchen on the Olympic. For example, what did they find? Kamay Tiud Me'itlas Hayhudi, Angli. You have the certificate of the kosher butcher shop. Shasipek es motzarei habasar. What's motzarei?
The derivation of the supplier.
You have the certificate of the butcher shop that supplied the meat to the White Star Line, and we have on the certificate the name of the Rabbi Machshir, and we also have the menu and what they served on Wednesday nights and Thursday nights. Umitachtea roshum, and it said on it, you could get kosher food cooked by a Jew.
Who was the Rabbi Machshir?
Oh, I'm going to show you a picture of him soon. You could assume then, Titanic, you could assume the Titanic also had a kosher kitchen. Now, Eidus Muchashis Misparsam Eskan Luishona, Eidus Sakinim, Klei Michael, Kosher Shenoser Me Hasfina Olympic. Amazingly, they found silverware of the Olympic, and how do they know it's kosher? Because engraved on the silverware, and you'll see right here, are the words milchik and fleshik. If you look very carefully, actually I have a better picture in the Sefer. They found the silverware, and on the silverware it's engraved. Here, this is very clear. Mem Lamed Chaf Gimel.
Wow.
Here, if you want to pass it around. I don't know, So, kosher chalavi b'sari.
Anything you
Okay, now not only that, on the White Star Line menu for all the customers, on the bottom it said kosher meat supplied and cooked for Jewish passengers as desired. Okay.
Yeah.
Thing that the menu's in English when most of the passengers
No, so
European.
so this menu is, the general
But this
menu
is
for
an
the.
American shipping company.
This is a general menu for all the passengers. Okay.
Oh, this is not the kosher.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the rescue boats, which I'm sure you know was insufficient for the trip. Okay, lemikre cherum. What's cherum?
Free.
It's cheruz. In for emergencies. The boat was equipped with 20 lifeboats. But obviously, it was not enough for all the travelers and all the workers on the boat. It was sufficient for about half of them. So we said there are 2208 passengers. There was only enough lifeboats for about half of them. Now you should know, it was more equipped than regulation. In other words, regulations of the time didn't even require them to have as many as they did. Now the main reason why there were so few lifeboats, why didn't they bring more? Number one, they said it ruins the appearance of the boat. They wanted the boat to have a luxurious look to it, and the lifeboat really ruined the look. And also it would cramp the passengers. And the obvious reason why they didn't have is their confidence and their arrogance that this was the ship that could not sink was the primary reason that they didn't have enough lifeboats. Okay. Now he writes in the bottom paragraph, Mistaber, just like most natural accidents, it's confidence, it's false security that leads to disaster. Because even when the sailor was given the forecast that the iceberg will lay right ahead of them, the sailor dismissed it, the captain dismissed it, and he did not even order that the ship slow down. So in other words, when the captain got the report, iceberg ahead, he did not slow down the ship. Why? Because it's all about getting to the destination before the reported schedule. B'shal nechisha is nalachavitz because of their determination to get to New York before the time printed on the cards, and because of that, they did not even before this expedition. They did not go through the safety exercises to practice letting down the lifeboats and practice emergency procedure. Okay, so let's talk about some of the details of the ship. So now you have some pictures of some people getting onto the boat. Okay, boarding. Now, Hasfina hafliga b'yom 10 April 10th, 12 in the afternoon, from the port in Southampton in England. Who was the captain? Rabbi Chovel Havard Smith. Actually, his name was Edward Smith. He was 62 years old, and he was considered the most experienced and adept sailor of the time. And his plan was to retire after his return to England. Well, he was forced into early retirement. Okay. After many stops, the boat left on the 11th of April from Queenstown, Ireland, on the way to the port in New York. So the ship made a number of stops, and it finally left Queenstown, Ireland, on the way to New York with 2,208 passengers, including the workers on the ship.
So 22.8 included the crew.
Yeah, including the crew.
Wow.
So the first class tickets. Now, one of the goals of this ship was to provide luxury at the highest level. This was, so the business class, the first class, was very luxurious. You could see pictures. They had a gym there with exercise equipment, the latest exercise equipment. They had smoking docks. Whatever you wanted to do, it was available on the ship. So it was very expensive, the first class. And many of the wealthiest people in the world were aboard that ship, including some of the... including some of the wealthiest Jews of the time, and including now many people today erroneously think that there were certain wealthy Jews on the ship that were not on the ship. So you have to get the record straight: who was on the ship, who was not on the ship. There is a lot of misinformation about that. Okay, now about 4 days after the Titanic left on the maiden voyage to New York, it was the evening. It was of Sunday night.
We know if you had a shul on the ship. Does it say anything about that?
There was a steeple. No, we don't have any information on that. I doubt it. The 28th day of Nisan, 1912. It was 23:40. It was 11:40 in the evening, and the sailor realized, who was standing on the beak of the ship. What's the word for that?
Crow's nest.
Um,
Crow's nest. It's the lookout station.
okay, that there is an impending iceberg opposite them, directly, 180 degrees. Hu divach al kach lenavat. He told the sailor, the navigator, asher hita esaniya l'tatzma, so that they turn the ship to the left, and the ship crashes into the iceberg on the right side. L'chein, the iceberg ripped a tremendous hole of many, many meters and completely gashed 5 chambers, the 5 first chambers of the ship on the right side. Okay, so here you have a picture of the ship going down. So what happened? So as soon as the emergency was, they were informed of the emergency, and people realized the ship was going down in a number of hours. So the satellite navigators or the coast guards sent SOS to other boats. But it's the middle of the night, and all of the people who were working the satellites were down for the count. They were all sleeping. And they didn't even read the emergency messages, emergency SOS, emergency telegrams. Now, a number of ships who were 4 hours away, they got the message, but it didn't do the passengers any good, and there's nothing they could do about it. Okay, so they immediately sent word to let down the lifeboats, and that people should start going down on them. However, most people did not want to leave the security of the luxury liner to go out into the freezing cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean on little toy boats that looked like they would fall apart. And you have to realize the horizon was nowhere in sight. They were smack in the middle of the ocean. Okay. Now, another thing was, it wasn't possible for most passengers to get onto these boats, only first class, because the first class they had access to the area where these boats were coming from, and unfortunately, the first lifeboats were only filled to about half capacity, 20 to 30 people, because most people didn't even have access to get onto these boats. Second of all, the reason why these boats were not full is because the captains called out, men first, women and children first. So therefore, most men were not given the opportunity to get on. So the first lifeboats were full to half capacity. However, as the ship was sinking, and people realized the boat was going down and there was no hope to stay on, the last lifeboats were filled to capacity. Fine. Most people who survived the Titanic were first and second class. Those who were closest to the siphon. What's the siphon?
Top deck.
Must be the top deck. Also, chelek misdaronos hamachalka shishis ninon b'fnei anashim shotzi umot mimena. Some people in third class were just trapped. They couldn't get out.
Yeah, there was below decks, and the water was blocking the stairways that they would have used to get up higher.
Okay. Hamayim shechadru al betanani, the water that pierced into the boat, drew the nose of the boat downward. Yeah. V'nishbechu me'al lemechitzo shefridu esamadurim. And it poured on the separations that separated the various changers.
Yeah, all right.
Now I don't know whether this picture makes any sense.
Wrong. The nose went down first. that's
see the
propeller.
screws in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's
They look at me like it was in front of me.
Okay. So v'garmu l'sfina l'shkaya tech kedei netias hachartam. It started to drown toward the nose. Netia shahalcha v'echmira imchil fazman. And the angle became more dramatic as time passed on. At 12 o'clock, the water already reached the highest chamber, and 10 minutes later, hisroimamu hayachasayim me'al pnei hamayim. The bottom lifted up on top of the waters. So that means it completely. What?
The propeller was exposed.
Yeah. Right. The bottom was already lifted up from the water. Heim himshichu l'sroimim. It got higher and higher. Ad sheshelet hasfina lo yamad b'mishkal v'nishbar. Till the body of the boat could not maintain the weight and it broke. So Yarkasei Titanic Sanchu Chazara al Pnei Hamayim, and now the bottom plummeted into the water until a short time later it rose again. Why? Because it did not completely cut off from the nose that had sunk. Till it began to float on the water, and afterwards it sunk from the weight. And this is what, so it basically went back and forth for about 2 hours and 40 minutes. And at 2:40 at night, 15th day of April, the Titanic made its final plunge into the ocean floor. So they sent out many lifeboats, the Hemshech Halayla, the Hashkem HaBoiker, and they only saved a few of those people who drowned. Most of those who sunk, about 1,496 people, drowned in the icy waters forever. Only 712 people were saved.
So about 25%.
About a third.
How many people
Yeah.
were on the plane?
2,208.
So,
700 is a third.
It's about a third, yeah. So I can't tell you, besides the people on the lifeboats, I don't know how many other people were saved.
Very few. They couldn't exist to live in the cold water. Anybody who jumped the ship and went into the water got hypothermia and freezing waters in Atlantic.
Okay. Well, as soon as the accident and as soon as this disaster became known in New York, so the Jews gathered together various organizations, Tzedakah v'Chesed, in order to assist those who were saved. So they immediately opened up the Beis HaKnesses Archim in New York, and that's where the survivors stayed. They had a shul, which was called Beis HaKnesses Archim.
where did the Titanic sink? How far from New York?
How far from New York? I don't know. Hundreds of miles. It's smack in the middle of the North Atlantic.
I think it was a couple hundred miles offshore. It wasn't more than halfway closer to the east coast of the United States.
Uh-huh.
I think north of Boston.
It was 4 days. No, 4 days of. Yeah, 4 days. It was only 4 days after they left Ireland.
The transit time was 6 days or 7 days.
Okay, so there's no need to say that this was a disaster that shook up the world. Here you have the sturdiest ship ever created, the ship that cannot drown, and it did. It was the cutting edge of technology, and immediately, this has sort of captured the imagination of scientists and researchers and detectives. Whatever technology was available at the time was used to investigate what happened. Even the Jewish newspapers, now the Jewish newspapers love a story like this. They joined in on it. Obviously, they viewed it from the Jewish perspective. In other words, there was no official count of how many Jews were on on the ship, it was just assumed that there were a large number of Jews on the ship, despite the fact that we don't know exactly how much.
And I'm sure the ride on that boat wasn't cheap either.
So you have over here a report from the Jewish Advocate that was printed in Boston, and its headline that week was "Many Jews were passengers on ill-fated SS Titanic." They wrote, "Yehudim Ram Hayu Bein Noisei Sfinas Atagana Chasar Samazal." No kidding, Chasar Samazal. The Jewish Chronicle of England, its headline was "Claimed as victims many of our people." Okay. Now, how are we going to figure out whether, in fact, they were Jews and what happened to them? So, by the way, here we have a picture of the Jewish cook on the Titanic, and we even have a picture of the mashgiach, okay, who is wearing, Baruch Hashem, a black hat, so you were able to eat there. Okay.
That's not a Borsalino.
When you purchased your ticket, so people filled out, their details, but they wouldn't write their nationality, and they wouldn't write who they belonged to. So therefore, besides about 2/3 of the Jews who were well known because of their personalities, to figure out exactly how many Jews are on the boat, and examine, it's not so easy to figure out how many Jews are on the boat just based on their names, but some of the names that we do find on the boat were Rosenbaum, probably was not Italian, right? Klein, Goldenberg, Harris, Clover, Meyer, Solomon, Weiss. Weiss is a Yiddish nomen. More than this, there was a Jewish butcher and Jewish kitchen. And here we have the picture of the Jewish cook and the mashgiach tamidi on premises.
This was of the Titanic or the Olympic? Because if this would prove that there was a kosher kitchen.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Right, because we said before we only
Yeah,
had
okay.
the Olympic.
So, the first knowledge that we had regarding the wealthy people that were on the boat, so for the first information they had was there were 2 multi-millionaire Jews, and multi-millionaire even back then, who were on this ship. The first one was Isidor Strauss, who was the brother of Nathan Strauss. Nathan Strauss was a famous Jewish philanthropist beginning of the 20th century. And the other one's name was Benjamin Guggenheim. They were both Ashirim Muflagim, who, Nebuch, their lives were cut short, and they died.
Even though they were traveling first class, they didn't get on the boat.
And we'll see, they had the opportunity to get on the boat. So the Jewish newspapers, they were the first to, when they reported, the first thing reported was the death of these 2 individuals, Isidor Strauss and Benjamin Guggenheim, and they reported on their heroism that they did not push themselves onto the lifeboats, and they died. And the Jewish newspapers promoted the fact that the reason they didn't push their way on was because of their Jewish values. And we'll have to examine, in fact, whether these are Jewish values or maybe it's not even the correct thing to do. Because in other words, chayecha kodim, even the Gemara that says that you save a man before a woman, can a woman say, okay, that's you, the Savior's halacha, to save him before me, but me, I'm entitled to jump onto the boat before him? And that's probably true. So even though if someone's in a position to save only one person, they have to save, we need a new battery, to save the
Save yourself, right?
Then you need batteries, so might get on the ship.
As we mentioned, even though the halacha is you save the man before the woman is entitled and maybe required to save her own skin. Okay. So he says, Henry Harris from New York, another two rich Jewish Jews, Henry Harris, and Emil Brandeis from Nebraska. When they found the bodies of Isidore and Ida Strauss, so this became a tremendous report throughout the world. Now, Kedarkim Shalitonim Haroshim Savav Super Masir, as is natural for the papers who they like a scandal, all the newspapers in the world, everyone's gathering as much information as possible. Yedia Itonios Shulis Divcha She'echad HaTachna Magdom Baniya HaYehudi Yelid Lodge. So the newspapers began to report a very terrible news that one of the technicians of this boat was a Jew. So now we could blame the Jews for and he was on the boat.
And he sabotaged the boat.
But he didn't make it mysteriously onto the maiden journey. So
He stood up.
Fake news.
Okay, so as soon as this news came out, we'll see, you know what, we'll continue with this next time, whether in fact this piece of information was true. Just, we'll end, you have a picture on the bottom left hand of some of the Jews that were saved through the Jewish Institute in New York. Here you have a picture of some of the survivors. You'll notice they're all women and children, because not too many men were saved. And unfortunately, on the bottom, you have actually a section in the cemetery in Halifax of. Yes, I think it was closer to the other end, to Europe, than it was to America. In Canada, no? Yeah. Yeah. And then, Rabbi say on the back half of of your sheets, you have matzevos. First of all, you have a matzeva of somebody, Yaakov Birnbaum from Antwerpen, and if you look on the top of his kever, they carved out an image of the Titanic on the kever of this Yid Nebuch Yaakov Birnbaum. And then finally, there is a survivor. There is somebody who perished on the Titanic, whose gravestone lays right here in the neighborhood in Queens. His name is Sinai Cantor, and he's married in Mount Zion. He was buried Yud Aleph Iyar, 1912. His name was Shmuel Mendel Cantor, and on his kever, I'll read to you the words. Let's see if I can find it. It says, Po Nitzman HaKadosh, Sinai Shmuel Mendel Cantor, Shetom Sos Yam, Imanias Titanic. So that's what it says on the. So you see, the fact that they died on this ship actually caused a certain stir in the minds and the hearts of their relatives, that this is something that they would write on their matzeva. Okay, he's Zichron Baruch, and we'll see Mirz Hashem upcoming Shurim what the halachic ramifications of this voyage was.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.